Hello and welcome very much to my workshop on how to use Salesforce to create a happier workplace. My name's Sarah Metcalfe, and I want to start by saying thank you so much to the team at London's Calling for this amazing organization, and to all of the sponsors for making sure that we can all get here in some form or other today. So who am I? Well, now I am the Chief Happiness Officer for Happy Coffee Consulting. I also run a global partnership called Woohoo Unlimited, and we help train and provide happiness at work expertise to businesses across the world. And I'm also the founder of the Global Online Happiness at Work Summit. But prior to that, I spent 10 years building a Salesforce ecosystem from a 4-person startup up to a global multinational. So I want to share with you my story about why happiness at work is more important than ever, and how Salesforce is the perfect tool to support your business to create a happier workplace and support your employees. I really love this quote as a starting point. The world of work is changing, and we all know that. We've had this moment of pause. And we used to work with our hands on a production line or out in the fields. And now we've been taking part in the knowledge economy where we work with our heads. But in the future, the more we talk about it, the more we're talking human-centric, and that people are going to work with their hearts. And so I'd like you to take that away with you as we think about the different questions I'll be asking you today. So I'd like to start by asking you to think about a specific time when you were happy at work. So this is an actual example that you went with. And I'm going to give you just a little minute to think about this specific story. And I'd like you to write down some notes about the words that play through your head when you think about that story, and really maybe circle anything that feels like a theme to you. So I'll give you 1 minute to stop and think about this specific time you were happy at work. When you're thinking about that story, it's good to think about who was there with you. What did it feel like? What was that day like for you? That's great. Hopefully you all were able to recall at least one time when you were happy at work. Now I want you to think back to that story and think about, was that a time when you were especially well paid? Really think about that. How about a time when communication with your manager was especially strong? How about a time when you were challenged at work? What about, was it a time when you were trusted and given freedom to carry out work in your own way? And that's a great question that was used by Henry Stewart of Happy Limited. And when you think about that and when you ask that question, it's almost always a time when you were trusted and given freedom to carry out work in your own way. And when we think about happiness at work, a lot of the time we think that it's about being well paid or having the success that we've aimed for. But when we think about those specific examples, that doesn't actually add up for us. And this year, when we think about workplace well-being and the future of work, we really need to be thinking about our employees and their well-being, even to the point that the Davos agenda has put workplace well-being and prioritizing the well-being of your employees on its agenda this year. And they say that that is the state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. that you should treat it as a tangible skill and actually has critical business input and measurable outcomes. That all of our companies need to be thinking about embracing well-being as an index of actions and daily behaviors. And by talking about it and leading in a way that shows that you have care for your employees, that your workplace culture takes those people into account. It needs to come ahead of our business needs. And a study that came out last year shows us that McKinsey & Company surveyed over 2,000 companies, I believe it was, and that 96% of those companies provided additional mental health support for their employees. But only 1 in 6 of those employees actually felt more supported. And that was especially true for diverse and working parents. So a lot of the time we're actually not, whilst we're trying to do the right things with business, we're not always getting it right. So I want to talk to you as well about, how can we change that narrative? Where are we getting it wrong? And how can we do the right things that actually support our employees' well-being? And I like this fact at the end of the Davos agenda that says it's crucial that leaders value their colleagues' and peers' well-being as much as their technical skills. And it's the responsibility of leaders to model positive behavior and prioritize supporting our colleagues' efforts. And the real reason behind that for me is because business has always been about people. You are absolutely nothing in a business without the people who run it for you. And you might ask, I get a lot of this, happiness sounds like such a fluffy concept. Does it really matter? And when we talk about happiness, there's a couple of things. Happiness is an umbrella term, and it refers a lot to all of the positive emotions. So positive employee experiences lead to creativity, and creativity is energy that comes out of our positive emotions. We know that helps people with lateral thinking, with processing complex information. You have a better attention span, all these attributes that we need to be creative, and creativity, especially in this world where we need to pivot and we're working agile and we have to be so responsive to the changing environments. When you have a positive mindset and a group of happy employees, they can see the possibilities. Whereas when we get into our negative mindset, that triggers our fight, flight, or freeze. So we're not able to really access those parts of our brain that make us human. And happiness at work is really important for ourselves. So what do I mean when I'm saying happiness? Well, Sonia Lubomirsky is the author of The How of Happiness, and she's a researcher who's done a lot of research over the years about quantifying happiness. And she describes it as the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well-being, combined with the sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. And when we think about that, I think it's really important to look at the happy side of that, those joy and contentment, but also that you're doing meaningful and worthwhile things with it. That's a real combination for me. And the founder of Woohoo is Alex Carroll, based in Denmark. And he defined happiness at work as a feeling of happiness you get at work. And it's really important to distinguish that. So you want to think about, it's not you bringing your happiness to work, but actually you go to work and you get it while you're at work. So I want you to do another piece of thinking and think about, how do you feel when you're having a good day at work? What's the impact on you personally? I'll get you to take your pen and jot that down. What does it feel like when you're having a good day at work? What's the impact on you? Maybe on the world around you, on what happens. It's really interesting, again, to think back to that specific story maybe. How's it feel? Did any of you say any of these? You might have more energy. You're happier when you get home or when you come out of the office. Maybe you're more relaxed and less stressed or more productive. Maybe you're more communicative. In 2018, we did a survey around the globe, and we found that these are the top 5 things people feel when they're happy at work. And so if you think about why is it important to be happy at work? Well, when you have those good days, then look at all the other aspects of the world that contributes to, and not only just for yourself, but for others around you. And happiness at work is good for you. You spend more time at work than you do with your spouses, with your children, with your friends, on your hobbies, and actually on all of those combined. You spend about 1/3 of your life at work. So if you're feeling miserable for those 8, 9, and hopefully not 10, 11 hours a day, you need to think about how that spills over into the rest of your life. And when you look at the longevity studies of people who have long lives, one of the major factors on that is having a happy work life. It actually helps you live longer. And when we look at health, there's not a huge amount that tells us that being happy at work makes you healthier. However, there's an enormous body of work that we know if you're unhappy at work, you experience stress and all of the impacts of that, so that there's a massive negative impact on your health if you're unhappy at work. And actually, it's quite damaging. We know now that workplace stress leads to higher levels of type 2 diabetes, some forms of cancer, and heart disease. So as much as happiness can sound fluffy and not serious, it can actually be a matter of life and death for some people. And then we look at your success. As humans, we tend to set ourselves really awesome goals. When I get this raise, I'll be happier. When I get this promotion, when I get this next job, and then unfortunately what happens is we set ourselves those goals, we reach them, and we just move the goalpost. So we chase success thinking it will bring us happiness. And it's actually the other way around. It's found that people who say they are happier are actually more successful. So happiness is good for you in all these areas of your life, and it spills off again into other areas that we want them to be. And so what is workplace happiness? Well, I think this wonderful quote from Anthea Ong sums up exactly what I'm always trying to work for. Imagine if we took workplace and stopped viewing it as a place where we are stressed or it adds to our burdens in life. And imagine if it was a place that could be a source of positive energy that energizes us, that fulfills our employees, and helps them show up as the best version of themselves in other parts of their lives. Imagine if that workplace where you went, you had more happy days than unhappy days. And if that spilled out into your home life, your hobbies, and the wider world around you. Imagine if it filled you up and fueled the rest of your life. Imagine what that world might be like. And happiness actually makes you more successful. So people who are happier are more productive, creative, they're better at service, more focused on quality, they have more empathy, and they're more resilient, something we really need right now. You get them more optimistic, motivated, they learn faster, they're better leaders. So it's huge for yourself if you want self-improvement to focus on your own happiness. And it actually makes your teams and your organizations as a whole more successful. So happier workplaces have higher productivity, better sales, lower absenteeism, higher growth, customer loyalty, employees give more discretionary effort. So all these things that we would like to have, these outcomes we're searching for in our workplaces, are improved by focusing on happiness at work. And really, it's that simple. Happiness at work is good for people, it's good for businesses, and it's good for the bottom line. And we do a lot of work with Nick Marks, who helped co-found the UN Happy Planet Index. And he says that it's the ultimate people KPI, that it's how humans talk about positivity. And it predicts if organizations and even nations are building a better future. So why not use it as this guiding star for you and your business? And actually, if all you care about at work is making more money, then the great news is happier companies make more money. If you compare the stock market, standard stock market, to the great places to work, you find that happier workplaces are on average 3 to 4 times more, 3 to 4 times points more every year on year, more successful than those just in the standard stock market. So what more could you want? So how do we create it then? It's a really interesting question, and this similar to what we found with companies investing in mental health. Sometimes we're not always getting it right. So I want you to take just 30 seconds here and think about 4 or 5 things that either your organization or a workplace you've worked in is doing to improve employee engagement or employee happiness, if those are the languages you use, and just write them down. What kind of things can you think of at your workplace? So I wonder if any of these things were on your list. Is it free fruit, maybe? If you got nice coffee at work? Did you used to have an office slide before we all worked from home? How about laundry and dry cleaning services or nap pods? I don't think everyone has that, but a couple of companies we work with do. And the problem with these things is they don't actually make people happy. So businesses are just throwing money into all of these nice things. But the reality is nobody sits there and says, today I got 2 pieces of fruit from the office fruit bowl and I had a great day. That's not what does it for us. And there's a couple of reasons. They create satisfaction, not happiness. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. You've got hedonic adaptation. And what does that mean? Well, that means the first piece of chocolate tastes great. But by the time you get to the 21st piece of chocolate, it doesn't taste so great. The same goes for a pay rise. That makes people happy on average for about 2 weeks. And then it becomes your normal. So we get adapted to new things. They become our normal, and then they don't make us happy anymore. And also they tend to invite comparison with others. Did someone get a better piece of fruit than you? Has someone else's office got a better coffee machine than yours does? So businesses are throwing huge amounts. I think there was 1.5 billion pounds spent on employee engagement in 2018 in the US alone. And we've seen from those reports coming out from Gallup that engagement is at the lowest levels it's been in a long time. You've got people who are actively disengaged at work. So something about what we're doing isn't working. And this is what I'd love to share with you today. The reason it's not working is we really have 2 ways of thinking about happiness. And this is based on Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. We have job satisfaction, which is what we think. And that's when you sit down and you look and you say, well, I get paid well and I have great bonuses. We have nice coffee. You know, I've got good benefits. So that's when you sit down, objectively review what your work is. And then we have experienced well-being. And that's really about what we feel. So what we think versus what we feel. And we think about what we think as job satisfaction, and what we feel is happiness at work. And all of those things that we talked about and we saw on that list, maybe that were on your list, those things have a big impact on your job satisfaction when you're objectively thinking about it. And the other thing that impacts is career choice. So if you want to attract people who come to your work, those are all the things you need to have on your list to make sure new people want to come and work with you. So you should definitely have those. We think of those as a bit like a hygiene factor, really. But the things that go ahead and really affect our happiness at work is our life situation and our physical health. So if we're living through a global pandemic, that can have a big impact on our happiness at work. If you've just been diagnosed with a disease, again, that can have a huge impact on your happiness at work. But within the workplace, the things that really, really have an impact are results and relationships. You know, meaningful results at your work and meaningful relationships. And we like to say doing great work together with great people. And those are the things that impact our happiness at work. And actually, all of the outcomes that we've been looking for, the productivity, the creativity, lower accidents, more innovation, the empathy, the service, the better sales, those all come from that feeling of happiness at work. And the impact is actually quite small from job satisfaction on happiness at work. It has a small impact. But again, the impact of happiness at work on job satisfaction and people coming to work for you is much, much larger. So that's why we're kind of investing in that bottom quarter and we're not getting what we think. There's a great story that one of the clients at Woohoo said, I give my staff free smoothies every day and they're still not happy. And why is that? When you think about that happy story you thought about earlier, I'm guessing it wasn't to do with any of the things on that list. But there's one thing we need to remember. We also experience a big loss aversion. So if you have any of those perks and bonuses and benefits, you have to keep them, because if you take them away, they have a huge negative impact on people's happiness at work. And I imagine we've all probably worked somewhere where we used to have a nice coffee, or we used to have a certain type of sandwiches, and then they got taken away, maybe budget cuts. And then everyone's still talking about that 5 years later. So when you put those things into place, you need to be really thoughtful and intentional about thinking about putting them in and making sure you don't take them away. Now, one thing that's really important is that one size does not fit all. So some people are slightly more focused on relationships. Some people are more focused on results. You might want to think about that for you. Which is more important for you? Achieving your goals and making that progress, having, that autonomy, mastery, purpose, or do you prefer to be praised on working together with your colleagues? And everyone is somewhere on a sliding scale. And in business, we really need to be thinking about, how do we praise people? We shouldn't praise people how we like to be praised. We should praise people how they like to be praised. And we're all different. So on top of results and relationships, we also think that there are two other aspects that really play into this. And one is purpose. And that's when we look at results and relationships. It's meaningful relationships, meaningful results, purpose. And the last thing is play. It's something that we're really missing right now. When I talk to people all across the world right now, we've kind of forgotten to have fun at work. And so looking into those 4 areas, I hope you'll take that as a lens, when you're working together, when you're creating things, and then we'll get to how we use Salesforce with it in a moment. Results, relationships, purpose, and play. So I'd love you to now take a moment and think about yourself. Where are you on that scale of 1 to 10 for each of those areas, for results, for relationships, for purpose, and for play in your workplace? So I'd love you to take a moment, write yourself down. Where are you on each one of those 4? And then think about and maybe star which of those 4 areas is the most important for you. It's interesting to think about in your workplace as it is right now. Are you getting each one of those, or is there somewhere that's maybe a bit low? And it's a great way to just having a think about yourself and other people, which really helps us to create better designs, when we're building systems for other people. So, happiness at work, doing great work together with great people. And now I'm going to start to do a little bit more of the workshop side of things with you. So I want to start you off. We're going to harness a little bit of your ideas and energy. I want you to think about this question. How could you create the worst Salesforce org? The worst one you've ever seen, one that users can't use properly, even if they want to, even if they're 100% adopted and behind it. What could you do to create the worst Salesforce org? Maybe you've seen it. So I want you to sit down and just jot those out. Let your imagination go wild. We really want you to there's no boundaries on this thinking. Take yourselves another minute and think about how could you create that terrible, terrible Salesforce org. What might you do? How might you frustrate those users? These people really want to do their jobs, but we're not going to let them. Usually when we do this, people end up with a really long list. So I'm really interested to see if you get a really long list here. Okay, the next bit is going to be a little bit uncomfortable. So now I want you to take off that free thinking spiraling hat and look again at that list that you've written. And put a star beside anything on that list that you're currently doing. You might not be doing as difficult or as hard as it says, but is there anything that you're doing even just slightly in your org? Put a little star beside it. Quite often it's uncomfortable because when you look at that through a different lens, you find actually maybe there's some things we're doing that we could make better. And one of the things about Salesforce that's so wonderful is when everybody uses it, then how rich it becomes and how full it becomes. So I'd like you to keep that list with you. And then as we talk through the rest of this session, think about, could you help any of those starred items with what we're thinking about? Or does it help you reassess how you're building your system? So Sales Cloud, when we talk about results, right? Sales Cloud and the basis of Salesforce is so exceptional a place to measure and celebrate results. And in a huge study that Teresa Amabile did in a book called The Progress Principle, she talks about, of all the things that can boost inner work life, the most important is making progress in meaningful work. And that's fantastic because in Salesforce, we have all the data and we can measure pretty much anything we want to. And so I want you to think about how you can access that data and surface it for your users. Because having people know what they're doing and see them celebrating their results actually has a really positive impact on their productivity and their ability to achieve things. And I also really enjoy this, how can you surface that to the leaders? Disney, a great customer experience company, talk about their great leaders don't allow themselves to be separated from the occurrence on the front line. So how can we create those visuals and those quick, easy, reports or dashboards that allow our leaders to see into the front line? It really helps them to make decisions or to empower people to make decisions even better. And when we talk about results, what do we mean by that? Well, results is knowing that what I do matters. Most importantly, it's being seen by your direct manager, and it's being seen and celebrated so that you know that everything that you're achieving has a place in the organization. And with Salesforce, because we can be connected, because everything should be in there, it's such a rich and powerful tool to allow us to celebrate results. Whether you're a confetti lover or a confetti hater, it's a great way to do that. What else are we talking about when we say results? It's about having autonomy, mastery, purpose, and the tools and techniques to achieve your job. And so how's a way to, in Salesforce, to make that not just by looking at reports and dashboards, but are you using those tools and techniques? Are you surfacing them for the people doing their jobs so that it makes their jobs better and they're more able to achieve those results that they're looking for? It's such a tool to do that. And when you think about it with that lens, you can really start to make magic things happen for those teams, and then they'll be happier to work there. So I want you to go ahead and think about it. How could you focus more on achieving and celebrating results in your org? And one example I'll give you, instead of having a to-do list, you could create a ta-da list. I like to create a ta-da dashboard, which shows people what they've achieved today. And again, being able to see and celebrate your success activates that part of your brain that then makes you more capable and more able to be more productive. So it's a real kind of, instead of a downward spiral, that's a way to really get people on an upward spiral. So what could you do to celebrate more results in your organization? I'm not gonna lie, I quite like using confetti. I think it's great fun. It never gets bored. It never gets old for me. So now it's a bit of more of a challenge. What more could you measure in addition to sales? So sales is the easy stuff. That is what Salesforce was built for. But sometimes when you measure just the outputs, then people only try to achieve those outputs. We've seen people having phone calls or having meetings just to have meetings, so they tick their quota. But actually, what is the behavior that you want? It's probably having a meaningful conversation with customers, isn't it? So just measuring people's ability to tick a box isn't driving the behaviors you want. Sometimes with sales, they'll sell the wrong thing to meet that target because that's what they're being measured on. They don't necessarily even want to do that. But what could you do to help them see and help them measure the behaviors you want? Creating better relationships with your clients so that they buy more of the right stuff from you, not they buy 100 of the wrong things and then in the next quarter they're returning them. So I want you to have, again, another kind of 30 seconds to think about what kind of measures could you have that would drive the behaviors you want to see rather than just measuring the outcomes. So when we focus on behaviors, the outcomes kind of happen naturally. And while I know my part of this is being recorded, I'd love it if you guys pop in the chat so you get a bit more interaction with the other people watching it. Share ideas. What are you thinking? What kind of stuff is coming up for you when you think about this? How are you going to change the way you report on things? Pop it in the chat, or feel free to connect with me. Pop it on Twitter. We'd all love to see what you guys are thinking and what kind of things you can use to just make Salesforce even better than it already is. So Service Cloud is where my heart lies. My background is originally in customer experience, so I'm really excited to share some of this with you. And when you use Service Cloud for providing customer service and customer experience, you can really make magical things happen. And one of the things again, we've talked a lot about people. And why did I talk about happiness? Well, again, business is about people. Customer experience is about people. Customers are people. Hey, amazing. We're all people. And the things that make us happy at work are the same things that make our customers happy. So I really love this study that Stephen Van Belleghem did of the free text that comes along with NPS. If you don't know what Net Promoter Score is or NPS, you ask people how likely are they to recommend your service or product on a scale of 0 to 10. 9s and 10s are your promoters. 7s and 8s are neutral, so they don't do anything for your brand. And 0 to 6s are considered your detractors. So they did a free text kind of AI piece on the free text of NPS. And they found that people who were scoring 0 to 6, you get those if you have operational excellence. So all of your systems are working the way they should. People are able to order or buy from you or interact with you in the way they expect, and nothing goes wrong. But the 9s and 10s, so where you actually get your brand promoters and those people that you want to have and where you want your customers to be, it was because a human did something extraordinary. And I think that is really important. More importantly, it often had to do with having a positive surprise. And now in my 10 years running customer experience, a positive surprise was almost always that we did what we said we were going to do. So it doesn't have to cost you anything, and it doesn't have to be, one of those crazy wow moments. You can actually just show up and be and do what you said you would. So our biggest thing that people loved was they had a problem with a product and warranty, and we replaced it for them. This blew their minds. So thinking about that, you don't have to go, outside of your business processes to create this great experience. And even more so now, customer service, as we come out of this crisis, is really important. Back in 2007 to 2009, the customer experience leaders had 3 times more higher return for shareholders. And they bounced back, as you can see, much, much quicker and much, much faster than the people who did not have a good customer experience. So now is the time. But I know there's a lot of challenges right now where we need to be in all the channels and use all the different tools and be where all those people are. And then we automate stuff, and sometimes that doesn't go so well. If you're talking to a chatbot that just sits in a circular loop. And so how do we know the right thing to do when there's all these different technologies, and how do we choose what should be automated and what shouldn't? And I've not ever seen anything as clear and explicit as this. So when do you put a person in, when it's emotional, when it's complex, and when it matters to the relationship? And that's really that idea that Salesforce has of human-centered design, human-centered service. What are humans good at? What are we best at? Well, we have emotions. We have the ability to think complex thoughts. And we can tell when something matters to the relationship. And the AI that we have isn't quite there yet. However, I would say anything that is transactional, Salesforce is the best way to get rid of that. Automate an email send, someone ticks a box and then you need to close their account or anything like that. We've got Flow, we've got Process Builder, we have all these amazing tools now. So if there is something that is transactional, it does not need a human to be involved, then automate it. That is exactly what Salesforce is for. And then you actually free up your agents to do the important stuff, most importantly, when it matters to your relationship with the client. And what's important right now, well, customers are saying they want you to be, have expertise in everything that your business touches. So are you using knowledge? Are you surfacing information to the agents at the right time? Are you using really good tools to direct customers to the right agents who have the right knowledge, so they're not having to transfer and process? There's some fantastic tools out there that can just take that away. We were able once to set up, if it looks up and looks for the agent the customer last spoke to, and if that agent was free, it routes that through to them. So really brilliant ways that you can create a more meaningful experience for these customers. Empathy. So do you automate the transactional so that you can maximize your people to activate their empathy for your clients? And speed, have you started using some of those self-help tools? They're super easy to set up. And can you deflect a lot of those transactional things because you know the answer to A equals B? Because we have to do all these things right now, find savings, find faster ways to do things, but we can't sacrifice the experience for our customers. And the last piece I really want to talk about in customer experience before I ask you guys some questions is it's time to melt the iceberg of ignorance. Salesforce has some really fantastic ways that you can give people their autonomy, give agents the ability to do things. There's nothing worse than phoning up, speaking to someone on the other end of the phone who wants to help you, but the system stops them from doing it. I think we've all experienced that. It's so frustrating. It's frustrating for the people who work for you as well. So when we make decisions, the more senior we get, the further away from that front line we are, right? So how do we think about giving the ability to problem solve back to the staff? How do you allow them to make changes in your process and your systems because they know what's working and what's not? And we don't always know that the further away we are from the front line. And I also want to add this in, when you make your agents really frustrated, then they're not happy. And that probably affects their ability to upsell, because happy advisors actually sell 13% more. So if you are feeling like you can melt that iceberg of ignorance, give them the autonomy, give them the ability to have results and relationships, they're going to be happier. What's it going to do? Give you more sales. And who doesn't want that? So relationships, when we talk about relationships, we can automate transactional. You can free up agents to create those more meaningful relationships with your customers and with each other. You can remove barriers for them, so the frontline staff are able to just solve things really quickly. And then you can use Salesforce to be where your customers are when they need you. They don't have to context switch. They can just be in the moment with you, and that's going to make your life much easier, because happy customers give you a lot more time. They give you a lot more ability to solve problems than unhappy ones. So, time for you to think again. When you think about your service provision or how you provide customer service inside or outside of your business, I challenge you with this 20-second rule. What could be made 20 seconds easier inside your service organization? And that's either for your customers or for your employees. And if you think about across a service organization with a large contact center, you can even turn down 20 seconds to 5 seconds and think about the time savings and the happiness of your employees who don't have to do that copy paste into a different system again, any of those things. I'll give you 30 seconds to sit down and think about what could be made 20 seconds easier in your organization. And actually, a really great way to get some of the answers to this particular question is to ask the people on the phones. They almost always know the easiest thing you can do, the low-hanging fruit. And if you can make that happen for them, whew, that's quite magic. So the second thing I want to ask you is, what could you automate for those agents to free them up to be able to use their key human skills, to have that human-centered service design in your business? Next question on this one is, how could you celebrate results in your customer service organization? Because that's quite difficult. In a service organization, there is always work to do. There's always tickets coming in. There's always cases to solve. So how could you flip that on its head? How could you celebrate results? How could you see the work that you've achieved? Don't forget to go ahead, throw those things in the chat, ask questions if you want. It's nice when you're watching this together with other people to get their input, gets your ideas firing. My last challenge to you is just an idea of thought and something that you can use Salesforce and Service Cloud to do. How can you shift your customer service organization from a cost center to a value center? How can you measure those values that are going on inside your organization and surface that across the organization? How could you link the different areas in your Salesforce org to see what great service impacts? So we'll leave Service Cloud behind. And then I want to talk about using Salesforce to do great work together. It's such an amazing tool for us to bring people together inside and outside our organization. And right now, resilience is such a key skill. It's everywhere. We see it in the news, we see it in business, and anywhere on LinkedIn you look, there it is. And there's 4 types of resilience. You've got psychological resilience, emotional resilience, physical resilience, and community resilience. And I'm just going to focus in a little bit on community resilience, because right now in the pandemic, what we found is that instead of having that ability to all get together, to pull together, and do great work all together, when something really bad happens. I'll never forget, there's a flood in our offices, and everyone got together to try and solve that together. That's the glue that kind of holds people together, is our community resilience. And we're really missing that right now. We have to be physically separate from each other. And so we're missing out on that huge piece of community resilience. And community resilience is kind of defined as the sustained ability of a community to use its available resources to respond to, withstand, and recover from adverse situations. And so that ability to combine our thinking together is something that when we're all working individually at home, we really have lost out on that. Even when we're just in back-to-back meetings, we're not actually necessarily working together. And we tend to be having a little more transactional interactions. And really, I think when you think about communities, I believe that teams are our communities at work. And so we can really harness this power of communities and community resilience if we take the tools that we have in Salesforce and really think about how are we getting people into this org? If this org is a place to hold our communities, how can we do that? And first off, I want to think about how could you use a Salesforce tool to enhance your organizational sense of purpose? Purpose is really big right now. It's big for employees, but it's also big for customers. They want to know what your purpose is. So how might you use the tools that Salesforce has to offer to enhance your organizational sense of purpose? I'd really love to know what comes up for you when you think about this. What is your organizational purpose? Do you know? Are you able to articulate it? It's a really good question to ponder on, to think about. And then we've got the fantastic communities. So I love communities in Salesforce. It's made someone who's not a coder be able to create such fantastic connections and abilities. So that's a question for you. If you have communities, if you have a communities license, how might you use that to enhance your connection to your customers or your partners, especially right now when people are missing their community? What might you do to create a little piece of community for those people? And if you're not using communities, maybe you could think about what would creating a community for your customers or your partners look like? What could that do for your business? So almost finished now. Still got a few more questions for you. So the last thing I want to share with you is play. And across uh, all of our clients across the world, what we found, it didn't matter what industry, where they were, but over the last year, we have forgotten to have fun together. We just haven't been able to have those moments. And I think we've probably all had a huge amount of Zoom fatigue. So the idea of meeting together for Zoom drinks afterwards, that is just, it's a bit much. So I want you to think about what tools can we use to enhance the fun. And again, I'm just going to go for it. Confetti, so much fun, never gets old for me. But you could do lots of really interesting things. You could put little quizzes using Flow. You can embed stuff into your page layouts. What if we were creating somewhere that it was fun to be in Salesforce, right? And why should we look at fun when we're at work? Right, work, work, work. That's all we should do. Well, Ingvar Kamprad was the founder of IKEA, and IKEA is a great place to work. It's really successful. And his foundations of this was that work should always be fun for all colleagues. We have one life. A third of our life is at work. So without fun, work becomes hell. And I think we've probably all experienced some versions of that, definitely over the last year, but also in maybe workplaces that weren't any fun, right? So how do we create a little bit more fun at work? And again, when we think about fun, it's a really small aspect on that happy, positive range of emotions. But when you have just that little bit of fun, then you unlock your creativity, your innovation, all these things that we really need right now. So you're investing a tiny bit of time and fun to unlock all of the other things that you want and have those outcomes. And positive social relationships is actually how work gets done. So when we create a sense of fun and that sense of people going together, it's actually a really great measure of how organizations, whether they carry on or whether they flounder, depends on the quality of the social relationships. And right now we're really missing out on that, really missing out on that. But not only that, it has those positive social relationships have an impact on the body's ability to build and maintain and repair itself in the workplace. So it actually helps you be resilient in work, but it also helps you recover and stay more healthy outside of work by having these positive social connections at work. So over to you to have a think. How could you use your Salesforce org to create just a little more fun? Can you use it to create more connection, to ask people questions, to have chatter groups where people share experiences or stories? And how can you weave that into what you do? And imagine if you make Salesforce less boring, you know? imagine what might your adoption look like if people want to be there. We would talk about gamification and all those things, but imagine if we were, activating those kind of sensory things and people got excited, or a little boost of excitement whenever they logged into Salesforce. Might that help adoption? Might that help people put more into that, give you more feedback, create a better org? I think it would. When I was doing research for this, I came across a presentation from Inspire East that Carrie Townsend did. And she actually said these words, so I stole them. Adoption has always been about the people, right? So if you're creating an environment in your Salesforce organization where you're using these lenses of happy workplaces and creating happy people, then your adoption is going to go through the roof. If they give you feedback and you're able to deliver those results, so they can see that progress, they can see what you're doing, they know how many tickets you've closed, they can see what work they're doing and how it impacts the other teams, they can link those things together, then that becomes a place that is almost self-sustaining. People are going to go back into Salesforce and they're going to give more to it because you've created this environment that isn't just about holding the data. So I'm going to ask you again to make some notes. How could you create more of a place for collaboration and learning inside your Salesforce org? How can you use the principles of happiness to increase adoption? Because if it becomes a place of collaboration and learning instead of just a place to hold the data, then people want to be there. And you might not be having to have those conversations about how come you didn't put your data in again. You might not even have to use the phrase, if it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen, because they might push that adoption and own it themselves. And when you think about these ideas you're having, I don't want you to think that they have to be huge initiatives. Nudge theory is just all about moving people ever so slightly in the direction you want them to do. So when I'm asking you to write these things down, try to distill it into, you might have a big idea, but what's the first thing you could do? What's the first step you could take? And if you start taking those small steps, people see that you're achieving things, and they believe that you're going to fix things for them. So they come to you, they tell you what they need. They'll show more about how Salesforce can help them. They'll see the possibilities. So that would be the end of my presentation. I'll leave you with one question, which is, again, how can you use the principles of happiness at work, results, relationships, purpose, and play to create a happy org? If you use those as lenses through which you're making your improvements, do they increase results? Do they increase relationships? Do they connect people to purpose? Are they helping people have a bit more fun at work? You might find that a kind of magical shift will happen because you're tapping into all those wonderful things that we as Salesforce lovers know is capable inside this org. And one great idea that someone told me about was, if you've got sales teams who are not allowed to look at each other's opportunities or anything, and there's worry about that, you can even use some of the AI built in to connect people who have similar clients, and they could start sharing best practice. So that's an idea on a way to use it, but there's so many different ideas. So I would love you to please let me know how you're going to make a happy org. I want to say thank you again so much to the team at London's Calling. I'm so grateful to be here. I can't wait till we can all be together again. Thanks to all of the sponsors for making it possible. Thank you so much to the video people who are helping me today and will, I'm sure, cut out my mistakes. And I wish you all a very happy rest of your day.